So, Patty, I really enjoyed our conversation today with Lance from OnePOS.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know if we've
I love the
ever,
topic, bars.
yeah, I don't think we've ever specifically covered the topic of the specific challenges that bars have. And this is not just going to be your standalone. This could be a hotel bar,
Right.
other things like that. And so really talking about what they need from a point of sale option. I think our audience is going to find some interesting things about that vertical, not to mention the fact that that vertical really is adopting dual pricing.
Right.
Which is really big. One of my really good friends in the industry that has built a big portfolio, Patty, has built it almost entirely with bars
Hmm.
and has just been very successful. All of them on dual pricing.
Right.
So they've done really, really well with that.
And
Um,
another thing about bars that a friend of mine does a lot of bars in New York, and he says that they're primed for ATMs. Even before dual pricing, they were primed for
yeah.
ATMs.
Yep, absolutely. A lot of foot traffic, a lot of people going to different places, going to a club
Hmm.
afterwards or whatever it
Yep.
is. And so
Exactly.
get that cash out. So then I talk about this new texting service that I'm using where people have been texting me objections and I've been
Hmm.
texting back my rebuttals. So
Hmm.
today we cover the objection of when you're going to a merchant, the merchant says my software is already integrated with a different payment processor, so you can't integrate with me. How do you overcome that objection? And so I cover that. And then Patty, tell us about the insiders.
An update on buy now, pay later, and sort of the regulatory winds that are blowing in that market.
Excellent.
So
Well,
our episode today is brought to you by ISOAMP. You can find out more at getisoamp.com.
awesome. Let's go. Hey, everybody. Patty and I are here today with Lance Lair, who is the CEO at OnePOS. How you doing today, Lance?
Excellent.
Awesome.
Oh,
Well, thanks
love
for
to hear
joining us.
that.
Well, we are going to talk today about a topic that I love this, Patty, because in our industry, it seems like almost every other week I'm saying, here's a topic we've never
We
discussed
haven't
before.
touched yet,
How is this
right?
possible? We've been doing this for years. But today we're going to talk about payment processing, specifically point of sale solutions for bars, which would include, hotel bars and standalone bars and a variety of other things.
And having been to a lot of industry events, I can tell you that our industry really likes bars.
Maybe too much at some of it.
Maybe
Maybe
Yeah.
sometimes too much, yes.
Well, Lance, before we dive into that, give us your story. How did you get into this crazy industry? And then tell us about your path to, OnePOS.
Well, I married into it, which seems to be a bad way to start. But my wife's family owns some restaurants and hotels, and when I had finished graduate school, my wife and her mother figured out some story where I would come out and run their restaurants, and so I got involved in that. And what's great about OnePOS is after working in the family business for about 10 years, I went out on my own and I actually opened restaurant number one in OnePOS. So
Uh-huh.
just the other day, somebody said, "Hey, we're doing an upgrade on this restaurant that I no longer own," and they said it's serial number one, and I was like, "Yeah, that I know that one. That one's me."
That's
But
great.
yeah, so I grew into that, and the founder and main software developer at OnePOS at that time, we were a fairly small company, is a good friend of mine, and he was kind of like, "Hey, can you come over and let me run the software and the development, and you run the other stuff that I don't like running?" And that just developed into me being the CEO and him now being kind of like our product guy and founder.
Wow, that's great. I
Very
love it.
cool.
So before we dig into kind of the payment side and the point of sale side of things, Lance, let's zoom out and talk about bars in general. So when you think about the owner of a bar today, what would you say are kind of their top 2, 3 challenges that they're facing that are kind of having the biggest impact on that market segment?
So I think the biggest thing, like everybody else, is of course labor, right? Getting
Sure.
quality
Sure.
employees that can do the work. But that's in the bar business. It's also quickly followed on by theft and
Sure.
opportunistic people kind of taking advantage of that cash nature of that business. I think we also face a whole bunch of things around, can we really produce the product and reduce our liability and make sure we're serving in a safe way, all of those things. I will say, just to the bar business alone, I think one of the current threats, well, let's call it an opportunity, is the non-alcoholic drink
Yes.
craze that's kind of starting to pop up, because people don't sit around and order 4 and 5 non-alcoholic drinks. It's just
Right.
not as fun.
Right. It's interesting that you say that. I when I was younger, I would go to bars a lot, but I don't these days. But I went recently, and I had that very same thought, Lance. It was like, I don't drink. So it was like, what do I order? Was my
Yeah.
first issue. And my second issue was I was there to see a friend who was playing in a band at the bar. And so I wanted to kind of be in the bar, but I didn't want to be on top of other people, because in this COVID weary kind of sense. So I would
Yeah.
imagine that that's an issue too, sort of like how do you safely and securely take care of your customers?
Yeah, I think hotels offer slightly different. Hotel bars are a different animal,
Sure.
just in the nature of, I think you have to be able to do quality and an experience for the nights where it's just a hotel bar. But there are other times where, you have a bartender that's not really a bartender, so you need to be able to provide some simplicity in the POS and payments world as well
Sure.
as the drink selections. And then other times, it's a convention and it's all just crazy, and you
Boom,
need
boom,
three
boom,
bartenders
boom.
in a bar for one person. So I think it's interesting just because in the hotel scene, it's the flexibility of being able to do all of those and do them well. Because people are like elephants; they never seem to forget when you mess up. So
Yeah, yeah. So what would you say then, in terms of a point of sale system addressing the needs and challenges of a bar? You know, why
yeah,
is it, how does this play into it? The role that the POS system plays.
right. Well, so certainly, I think the POS, serves really as that fundamental engine for transactions and accountability. Right.
Okay.
Everything else kind of feeds off of that, and I think there's a couple of schools of thought. One is everybody wants to know, oh gosh, there's a POS there, and it kind of stands out, and it's a thing. I think we take a little the opposite tact. We want nobody to notice the POS because it's so seamless and so easy, and it's just not
Uh-huh.
like an issue anybody talks about. So I think that what we see with that is, you've got to just have a solid POS where it's very intuitive and your training time is reduced. And, what we were saying, like in a hotel bar, if I have to throw two extra bartenders back there in a crisis, it cannot be difficult. And we all know, if you have a complex scheme for how you charge somebody for an upsell or a double,
Right.
you fall apart very quickly. People do the
Sure.
easy thing. And so the more you can link that all together, so when somebody hits the double button, it automatically charges the right amount for whatever liquor they were doing and stuff like that. Those things become more and more significant, I think, to the effective operation of a bar. And then just flat out the accountability. I mean, you need to
Right.
know that you didn't, when you ring up a Bahama Mama, you have to know that it's accounting for the right amount of rum and the right amount of, everything, so that when you print a menu mix, you can keep a pretty good handle on where you're at in terms of cost and loss and theft and all of the things that go into that.
So those all have to be specially sort of built into a bar POS system.
Yeah,
Um,
they do. Yeah,
Unlike, for example, what might be, commonplace in a restaurant, right? I mean, just a plain restaurant.
yeah. I mean, I think they are great to have impact a restaurant, but are they really the core element?
Right.
Probably not. They're nice if you've built it in a way that's intuitive and all of that stuff's built in. It's great because some of that does, in a bar centric business, the servers have to do the same thing. If you make it complex to ring stuff up and
Mhm.
cumbersome, they just kind of cheat.
Right.
Yeah.
You know.
So I want to get to OnePOS and talk a little bit more specifically about that, but I have one other kind of more broad question. I'm just curious to get your thoughts on, Lance.
Mhm.
I was really surprised. So when, now we call it dual pricing, differential pricing, cash discounting, surcharging, whatever, right? There's all these machinations and changes. But, this idea of having a different cash price versus the card price, bars really seem to grab onto this really quickly. It was kind of like auto repair and bars were like the ones that seemed to go out at first. Why is that? Any thought on your mind with bars specifically, and why they kind of, gravitated to that right away?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's because a bar customer in general is a little more transitional. So we're not talking about your corner bar. Let's kind of picture a little more nightclubish, right? They
Mhm.
come once a month, they come once every quarter, they come with friends, but there's fast, small transactions.
Mm,
So you just, I don't want to say you get away with it, but you kind of just, nobody's
yeah.
paying attention at the level they are.
Yeah.
I think at your corner bar where it's the same people around the bar every day, that doesn't go over so well.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but certainly in the bar, nightclub, hotel, it's just kind of, I think, a cost of
Mm,
an expectation that people have more and more all the time. And you again, I don't like the term get away with it, but I think you do it as a cost of running your business, and you can do that more smoothly in a bar environment than you can in a and
Mhm.
small ticket environment, right, where it's quick than a
mm.
big, here's your receipt, it's $300. Oh, and we added 3.5%. That feels a lot different than I bought a $7 drink and it was an extra 20 cents.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit and specifically talk about OnePOS, if you don't mind, Lance.
Yeah.
Let's start with the basics. What are the features that you knew you needed on day one? And how did you approach these features in order to, make them easy and intuitive?
So, some of the things we were talking about before, like building in where drinks, like in upcharges to drinks, are all done in an automated sense was clear. But I will say our number one thing is we design everything around an employee touching the bar or the screen as few times as possible. And that, may not seem like, well, they touched the screen, they tapped 6 buttons versus 3.
Right.
But, if that's all of a sudden 900 touches over a night, how many more drinks could they have made? How does that affect labor? How does all of that fit together?
Right.
And I think that matters. We built in some auto kind of like anti-theft things, like you can tell how long a tab has been open really easily, which a bartender that might be disingenuous. It's like, why have I had the same beer open for 4 hours? That doesn't really make sense.
Right.
And then we do some things like auto park tables. So if a bartender brings up 3 things and they walk away, if they walk away and you set a timer on that, if they don't come back to that open kind of cash screen in that amount of time, it just parks it onto a table. And once that tab is parked on a table, it's a lot harder to manipulate. It's kind of like a more permanent record than like a fast bar. Hey, I sold a beer, grab the cash, sold a beer, grab the cash.
When it parks onto a table. You mean a table in the machine, not a table out in the bar, right?
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, a table, it's like it locks it into a permanent location where they're kind of, stuck with that. We also do some great stuff, I think, with bar tabs. I think when EMV came online, there was this real lag between, you used to be able to scan your card and you'd put the name on a tab.
Right.
And when EMV came along, a whole bunch of people stumbled on that. But we actually picked that up pretty quickly. So we do a whole bunch of stuff with bar tabs and pre-auth and things like that. So you can still run a tab and be comfortable that you're collecting the money and that the authorization's accurate. And,
right.
All of those things go. So, we built those kinds of features in. And again, back to the core thing is the speed of transaction isn't just about ringing up the beer and where you send it. It's more about how fast is the credit card process. I mean, that speed is money in a bar, high volume bar, especially.
Sure.
Yeah.
And we do that exceedingly well.
The other thing I thought of, Lance, when you were talking about the number of touches, I think a lot of that too comes down to employee training and retention, right? Because it's like, you get a new employee in there, especially in a fast-paced bar. I mean, that could be very overwhelming to, that's exponentially more complex to learn that you have to touch 9 times versus 3. It's like, showing somebody how to touch 3, that's a lot easier versus, there's all these extra screens. What do I click? So I think that's really crucial for these bars as well. So one of the other features that really caught my eye, I was looking at some of the different things that you guys offer. One of them was this whole processing without the internet. So talk about that. That's pretty unique actually in the point of sale market today to really have something like that, the way that you do that really works well. So talk about that and kind of why that matters to a lot of the bar clients that you have.
Yeah, as we process, we're processing through a gateway and with all of the security features, we're not capturing that credit card number or storing it anywhere. But what we are using is in that gateway is when the internet, disconnects, we can just go into what we would call a deferred mode, which means the card will give you an authorization that's not, I'm going to say in the real sense, it's just not real, right? But it is authorized. So you can continue on with that transaction. And then when the internet comes back on, it will then settle all those cards. There's an implied risk of, hey, if the authorization was bad that you didn't really get, you're going to eat that, right? But there's not much you can do with that. But on the plus side, when the internet comes back on, we still process all of those as card present. So you're not getting raked over the coals on some, kind of extreme processing charge and all those things. And I'll tell you, more and more with the technology, we're encouraging people to just go with a wireless failover router as well. So if the internet connectivity, cuts out for more than, 3 seconds, it just goes to a cellular backup. And credit card processing is not a tremendous amount of data. And we're a store-focused POS. So we mirror everything into the cloud and have all that kind of cloud features. But in the end, if the internet goes down, we run exactly the same as we did was the internet was up, with the exception of credit card processing. So we solved that by doing deferred processing. And
Yeah.
We notice in Florida, because we have a fair amount of customers in Florida, the last hurricane hit, we would often be the only restaurant on the street running
Yeah.
because we actually didn't need the internet.
Right.
That's super interesting because definitely the trend is much more towards the cloud-based solution, which I know you have that, but then kind of having it something on the device that can take over as a backup is pretty cool. That's pretty
Yeah.
unique.
I mean, that's come a long way too, James. I mean, I remember we
Yeah.
talked to people it was like maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where that was they were just starting to figure out economical, efficient ways of doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. One of the other features, Lance, that I wanted to have you touch on, is, this is a little bit more complex, very specific to bars, but this idea of the ingredients and really kind of managing for liquor license liabilities and all that, this idea of how much is liquor and how much is juice or whatever. Talk about that, because that was actually pretty unique as well. I felt like that definitely more of a specialized bar feature there.
Yeah, so I'm going to hedge a little bit because every kind of state can be different on this and everything, and it has to do somewhat with taxation, but a lot of states this will work. So if you picture when you order Bahama Mama, half of it is alcohol and half of it is juice and garnish and all of those. We were actually developing for a hotel where they were doing packages, and we're like, wow, we really need to, in a hotel package, if you say $50 is a food and beverage credit, we need to be able to break that out into various places. So as a kind of fallout from that, we discovered that we could do that with drinks. So you can say the Bahama Mama may cost $10, but $5 of that goes to food and $5 of that goes to alcohol. Well, in an area where your liquor liability insurance is totally based on alcohol sales, you can reduce your alcohol sales by 50% on, that specific drink. It, of course, doesn't carry into beer or wine because you're not really doing anything with those. But in a kind of, exotic drink market and stuff like that, we can have a significant impact on how much liquor liability insurance somebody's buying. I mean, we've seen to the tune of many, many thousands of dollars for certain locations. Just because it really just depends on how that area does it. I mean, you got to be a little careful. Like if they tax something in a different way, you got to clear it through the taxing authority. But the insurance companies, by and large, have said, we accept that we just care about your liquor sales. And if you are taking out the non-alcohol part of your liquor sales, we're good with that.
Yeah.
And again, significant savings for the right kind of bar.
Right. Sure.
Like it. So last thing that I want to touch on here today, I know I'm sure we could talk for another hour about all these features and stuff, but I want to touch on sales and marketing a little bit. So our audience primarily being agents and ISOs, and you having worked with a lot of different ones, what have you found that works right now? How do they go and prospect? And, what are these bars looking for? I'm sure a lot of them now already have a point of sale system, maybe legacy, and they need to upgrade it or whatever. So what have you found that's working right now in terms of marketing and prospecting to get new potential clients?
So I think in general, I think a little bit this is kind of post-COVID, and everybody seems a little more community-based. And so I think that the idea that, you've got somebody from one state calling 100, just auto dialing 1 million restaurants and trying to get one, well, that can work. We find it's community based. Get involved in your community, be active, and have a genuine interest in the success and failure of the restaurants. Hopefully, all success. But when you actually take an interest in solving a problem for them and being an asset to their business, you get a lot more sales per let's say visit. Right? If I have to get a sale out of knocking on 10 doors, I better know them. They better know I care, and they better know I'm in their community and eat in their restaurant, and I'm part of it. When you do that, you get a much higher close rate. So sometimes that, I don't want to say is smoke and mirrors, but it's like join the chamber, join the the groups, the active marketing groups, join the a friend's referral can make it seem like you're tighter, more tightly tied to a business than maybe you are.
Right.
And if you go in and knock on their door and say, hey, buy credit cards for me, buy POS for me, it's a lot different than as the finish of my meal, I say, hey, can the manager stop by? I gave you something. Now you can spend a minute with me talking about what problems we can help you solve. In the end, for everybody, if you're not solving a problem for their business, there's really just no reason to switch to anything. So I think we really try and focus on knowing the industry and being able to help solve their problems, like with the things we've talked about here.
Love it. So what I'd like to do before we end, so I know I appreciate you taking the time to really zero in with us today on the bars, right? In that specific vertical. Obviously, I know One POS does a lot more than just bars. Take a
Yeah.
minute, if you would, tell us a little bit more about One POS, how you feel it kind of sets apart, and then also how you work with the agent ISO channel. And then lastly, where should people go to learn more if they want to potentially partner up with you guys?
Yeah. So, well, first off, One POS is just a fantastic POS in the context of when you want to run a complex bar or nightclub or restaurant, multiple kitchens, multiple bars, high volume, all of that. We always say, look, we do all of that complex stuff. It's shocking. We forget some of the things we do until somebody brings it up, right? So we do all that complex stuff, and we do it about in the simplest way you can. That is tough. You cannot be a complex POS and be simple at the same time. You're going to give one up
Right.
or the other, right? But I think we do a nice job of walking that line. So, what does that mean for why somebody would want to work with One POS? It's like we probably can support all of the brilliant ideas a restaurateur has. We can support their growth. When they add a patio bar, we can do that, right? We can do, printing by different time frames. It's like print it one bar here, print it a different bar during a different day. We support multiple kitchens. We have handheld devices and kiosks. It's kind of like we do all of that. We do it really well. But most importantly, we're focused on the efficiency of the POS. We don't want anybody talking about the POS. We want it to be so smooth and good they're not talking about it, that it just works and they don't have to talk about it. And the reliability that we bring to the table is I think really impressive. It's just we've always been this POS that just works, keeps working, and that is a key thing, and nobody notices it until your POS doesn't work, and then you realize how just how important all of that was.
Yeah. Hey, one thing I just thought of too that I didn't ask you about. Talk about the processing piece for just a second. Our audience is always kind of wondering.
Yeah.
I mean, there's people that are fine with, hey, let me work with you to do the processing and the POS, but others don't want that. Like, are you guys processor agnostic? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we're processor agnostic. We use a gateway that allows us to go to most any processor. I mean, we offer processing, and we really do our best for anybody to be 100% competitive in what their margin is and how they need that to look for their customers. And when somebody goes, well, no, I still want to process for myself, I'll be honest, we pinch them a little bit on a gateway fee to go, look, we have this cost of infrastructure that we no longer get to, put in. So we charge them for the gateway and do some of that. But so far, we're for the most part able to compete with whoever they're already, have a great relationship with in a processor, and we can match up to that most always, and then just do the processing with us and save the gateway fees. And, you had mentioned, I forgot to say, how can you get a hold of us? You go to our website and, click the contact us thing, and that'll start a process. And, I think we have a great program in that we do some stuff with what we call a limited reseller, which is kind of you sell the POS and the credit card processing, and we'll handle all the support. And we know that most ISOs are like, yeah, I love all this stuff. It's great, but I don't want to get a call at midnight on Saturday night. And we do that. So, we kind of take that pain away.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Lance, give us that website if you would for our audience.
Sure. It's onepos.com. ONEPOS.com. It's not the number.
Awesome. Yeah. That's an easy one to remember. So, Lance, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk with our audience and share some insights. Again, that website was OnePOS. So all spelled out ONEPOS.com. And thank you again for taking the time, Lance.
Hey, it was great talking with you guys, and always fun to be around industry experts. So good talk.
So Patty, today I want to talk about ISO AMP and our quick quote. Okay. We're not talking about statement analysis now. We're talking about a quick quote. Now, what we found is there are a lot of times where you're talking to a merchant and one of two things is going to happen. Either number one, they are going to give you enough information where you could do a really quick estimate. This is especially true with dual pricing, cash discounting and those types of, even compliance surcharging to some extent, where really you have their total volume, how many transactions or what their average ticket is, generally how much they pay in fees. And you just want to really quickly
kind of a ballpark.
Yeah, you want to give them something with a ballpark, but when you do that ballpark, you want to protect yourself against making mistakes in terms of margin and all of that, right? So we have that ability. And so that, all of our clients have an unlimited number that they can use of these quick quote. So we have, when you pay ISOAMP, you pay for a certain number of statement analyses a month, but it also includes unlimited quick quotes. And so you can go in there and use our little calculator. But what's really cool is we made an upgrade to it about 6 months ago that's been very popular. And that is you can actually now go in and you can add some fees to it. So let me explain this. This is really, really powerful. You're standing there talking to the merchant. I talked last week about full automation. So maybe they have a kind of a nasty scan. You upload it. It doesn't get fully automated. So it's like, okay, I'm going to get this back in 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever. You don't know. Right. So you're like, I just want to do something real quick. Well, you can put in some total volume numbers or whatever. Then we actually set it up to where you can go through and add a few lines. So you might look at the statement and say, well, I'm not going to enter all 400 lines of the statement or 100 lines or 50 lines. But I can see here that they're on interchange plus 35 basis points and 10 cents.
Mm-hmm.
Our tool makes it incredibly easy. We already have the volume. We already have the number of transactions. Very easy for you to say, add what we call a VMD per item, a Visa MasterCard Discover per item fee of 10 cents. Add a VMD volume or a Visa MasterCard Discover volume of, 35 basis points.
Okay.
Then we already estimated the interchange. We already estimated the card brand fees. So it's just going to take everything that's left over and just call that other fees. Right. And you can make something that actually looks pretty good and has some of your fees side by side with it.
Oh, cool.
So it allows you to go in and you can kind of enter as much as you want from the statement. So again, I want to clarify here. ISOAMP is the leader in full service statement analysis. And so you can obviously just upload the statement. And I still encourage you to do that, even if you do the quick quote. But there are those situations where either you don't have the statement, they're just giving you some rough information, and I'll use the quick estimate a lot of times to get them to give me the statement, right? So I'll say,
sure.
How much do you do in processing volume? Let's put that in there. Hey, it looks like I could save you something like maybe $3,000 a year, but I'd love to take a look at a statement to make sure exactly what it is. And then you upload it. So anyway, unlimited quick quotes. Check it out at getisoamp.com, getisoamp.com. Get a demo, full service statement analysis, quick estimates, full automation. We've got the entire package as well as the W2 team to back it up.
Check it out.
Okay, Patty. So today in questions from the field, I thought I would answer an actual question from the field. I have about 8 or 9 of them that I'm going to run through over the next 8 or 9 weeks. And I want to talk about where this came from. So I have a new service I set up where I am able to communicate with agents, ISO execs in the industry via text.
Right. Yeah, I saw your announcement on that. Yes.
Yeah. So it's not like a normal kind of mass texting platform. I mean, there's a little bit of that technology to it where I can send out a campaign to everybody, but it allows me to actually interact and have one-on-one communication as well. So as I start this section out, what happened was I sent out a text and said, what's your most common objection?
Right.
And I have my responses that I went through and found the most common objections from a bunch of agents.
Perfect. Excellent.
I thought that'd be really good. So before I jump into that, if you want to take a second, pull your car over or something or write this down, you can actually text me. It's 814-482-2090. So let's say that one more time, 814-482-2090. If you just text and say hello, you get a couple of automated responses to get you added to my contact list. And then after that, you're going to get a bunch of there's content I'm doing there that I'm not doing anywhere else. And so I'm sending out things. So as an example, what I'm going to give you right now, I actually send individual videos to people via text with my actual response. I had my daughter Alana help me with some of them. It was kind of funny.
Cool.
She played the merchant, and then I was the salesperson. We had some fun with that. But yeah, so if you want to get in on that, that's the number you can text me at. All right, so let's dive in. So first one I talk about today is my software is already integrated with a different payment provider.
Of course. Yes.
This was
very common.
Right at the top of the list.
I would imagine.
Yeah. So let's talk about this for a second. So a couple of things I recommend to do. Where most agents tend to go with this one is they tend to go in the direction of getting into a very technical conversation.
Yeah, sure.
Well, what kind of software is it? Who do you currently integrate with?
Questions that the merchant might not even have the answers to.
Right. Do you have the number for tech support? These kind of things.
Right.
And you actually want to really avoid that. What I recommend is certain objections. What you'll find is your best bet is actually to just go around those objections. Don't deal with them because you want to put them off and deal with them later. So here's how I respond when people say that. I say, well, I certainly understand that. As you can imagine, a lot of people I deal with already have a solution that's integrated with a different form of payment.
Sure.
Let me ask you this, though. Assuming that I could integrate. So let's just say for a second that I am able to integrate with your current technology solution. What else might be holding you back, or what other questions do you have? You just go right around it. And what you'll find a lot of times is then they'll kind of say, well, I guess it would just come down to cost, or they'll say something else. And what you'll
Right.
find is usually, excuse me, usually you can convert it into a financial conversation, which you don't normally want to do on the value proposition angle, right? But it's very important in this context because we need to get some numbers and we need to get
Sure.
them moving forward and making some progress. So a lot of times it's like, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess it would come down to, price and what we're paying now and everything, and say, okay, that makes total sense. So, do you have a payment processing statement? Do you know what your fees are? Let's start that conversation. And then meanwhile, I will certainly go back and look into this and see if we can integrate. But, the idea, the way you want to present it to them is, I will put all the work in to figure out if we can integrate and all that. But here's the thing. I may, this is why I tell people, it's so funny to me, Patty. Salespeople are so afraid to go negative. They don't
Of course.
understand going
Sure.
negative is the key to getting the sale almost every time. It's really funny. But let me give you an example of that in this case. What I'll say to them is, I'll say, I may or may not be able to integrate. That's going to take some work to be able to figure that out. But here's the thing. I don't want to do all that work and then I can't even save you any money, because if I can't save you any money, you're probably not going to move over anyway, are you?
Right. Right.
And they'll say, well, no, I wouldn't move over. Oh, well, exactly. So let's answer that question first. Let's figure out if it even makes sense, because I can do that really easily. Then let's figure out on the technology side what might make sense there.
And you get kudos for the honesty there, I would
do.
think, right?
You do.
I mean, because you're kind of like deflating their negativity.
Yeah, because they can't be negative on top of your negative.
Right.
You already went there. And that's the key.
Right.
When you realize that the merchant is going to go in a direction you don't want to go, the key is for you to go there first.
Sure.
It's really funny because you would think the key would be we need to get them away from that. No, it's not.
Right.
Like, I'll give you another really good example of this is cash discounting or dual pricing. When people, it's like, well, everybody tells me my customers aren't going to like it. Then you tell them that first.
Right.
So when you're talking about the pitch and they say, well, how does it work? You say, well, let me tell you a couple things first about that's really interesting. Number one, because of the fact that you're having a cash and a card price, obviously your customers are going to pay a higher price when they pay with a card. So the big question, of course, on your mind is going to be, well, how many of my customers are going to complain? And I actually have the answer to that, because some of them absolutely will complain. We found that it's about 1 out of every 100 or so transactions initially. And so if I could do something that would eliminate your processing fees, but you'd have to have that engagement with about 1 out of every 100 customers to explain it, is that an acceptable trade-off to you? Do you see what I'm doing? It's like, I know they're going to go there. I'm just going to go there first.
So go there first. Exactly. And
So
have
anyway.
the answer already.
Right.
Because that shows that you're really on top of your game.
Yes. So now going back to the software integrated thing, we get it down to a financial conversation. We're going to save them money, whatever it is, right? And now we can come back and now we can have the value conversation in one of two ways. If we can integrate, fantastic. Hey, good news. I can integrate. I can save you money. This is a no-brainer. Let's move forward. Right. If you can't integrate, you say, well, here's the thing. So it looks like I can save you, if you're doing dual pricing, for instance, looks like I can save you $1,700 a month. That's the good news and bad news. The good news is I can save you $1,700 a month. The bad news is I can't integrate with this particular system, but I found a system that I think is even better that I can integrate with. Let me explain some of the features of that system so we can get you that $1,700 a month. Right. And so now all of a sudden, now we have this good conversation. But here's one last key I'll tell you. This is unique for the integrated software. Okay. And a lot of people may disagree with me on this. I don't think you want to try to push forward too far with the sales process on the first visit with this one. There's a big psychological advantage to coming back, even though, I'll give you a really good example of this, right? You might walk in and see a Clover device.
Right.
Okay? You're not integrating with that. Like, there is no way you're going to integrate with that system. You're like locked out. But when you approach it this way and you say, well, I might be able to integrate and actually save you money. Let me check and see if I can, all of that.
Right.
Well, now when you come back and you give them a good pitch, now you could pitch them on either replacing their Clover with your Clover, that kind of approach, which is not ideal, but you can, or you pitch them on a totally different system, but the thing is, if you in that moment are like, well, I can't integrate with Clover, then you're done. It's over.
Right, because you don't have any recourse after that.
Right. You need to be able to kind of like, well, let me look into this. Let me look at what I can save you. Let me look at the options. Then when you come back, you can go, here's what I can save you. Your annual savings is going to be $26,000.
Right.
Well, all of a sudden now in their mind, they're thinking, oh my goodness, how do I get this $26,000? Then when you say, well, we are going to have to switch out your Clover station, or we're going to have to move you to this or that, it's like, well, okay, that's a trade-off between that and $26,000 versus when you're there, they're still thinking, well, they can't help me. And then when you say, well, I can't integrate with Clover, they're like, see, I knew you couldn't help me. And now you're done. So
Yeah,
that's my advice on how to overcome the objection of my software is already integrated with another payment provider. I will be providing a bunch of other ones over the next few weeks. Don't forget to text me, 814-482-2090. Just say hello, and you'll start getting some campaigns from me usually once a week. I'm sending out stuff. I have two different basically contact lists. One is individual agents that want people that want content about that on sales objections and things like that. And the other one is ISO execs who want information on managing the team, payment news and all that. So you'll get some emails from me asking you, hey, like what kind of content do you want? And, you can email that or text that back to me, and then I'll put you in the right campaign to get the right content.
give everybody, if you don't mind, James, one more time that number.
Sure. It's 814-482-2090.
Thank you. So, James, we have some new news on the BNPL, which of course is buy now, pay later front.
Okay.
It looks like regulation is starting to inch into this field, which of course was only a matter of time.
Of course.
The United Kingdom has been moving ahead with its plans to regulate this market. It published draft legislation on, of all days, February 14th. That would render these buy now, pay later agreements subject to the rules established by the Financial Conduct Authority, which is a non-governmental body that actually regulates financial services firms.
Okay.
It's very interesting the way they do that in the UK, which we can probably get into in another time. But
right,
basically, these companies have to perform affordability checks to determine the customer has the means to repay. Also, rules around marketing has to be fair, clear, and not misleading. This is the UK has been really active on this front. In fact, they've actually taken some steps against BNPL firms that they think are promoting it in an unfair, unclear manner. Apparently, there were like a couple thousand complaints filed last year.
Wow.
Yeah. So this legislation kind of comes out of something that was proposed last year. The plans are for a 2-year transition once the legislation is approved.
Okay.
And then during that time, firms will operate under sort of like interim rules.
Okay.
Okay. And they're going to have to be, registered and everything. So that's how they're going to keep track of this. And as we've discussed before, this buy now, pay later loan product has been gaining favor as an alternative to credit cards because it offers an interest-free option, provided the customer pays off the loan on time over a short period of time.
Right.
Now, the 5 largest providers, Affirm, Afterpay, Klarna, PayPal, and Zip, combined originated 180 million transactions worth about $24 billion in 2021.
Wow.
That's according to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Research and Markets, it's a firm over in the UK. It estimates that the global market is growing at a compound annual rate of 28%. So I did my math, which suggested that this year it would be something like 40 billion. I mean, you're probably faster at that than me, but that's kind of what I came up with. Just another little tidbit, Consumer Reports found that in the first 7 months of 2022, the number of Americans reporting that they used a BNPL product at least once jumped from 18% to 28%. Wow. That's a pretty significant jump.
That's a lot. That's like a third of everybody, like 1 out of 3.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, James, you and I often spar with each other sort of generationally, right?
Yeah.
And you told me, I think about a year ago that you had done this for the first time.
Yeah.
I did it for the first time over Christmas.
Yeah. And
it wasn't something that I really needed to stretch out. It's just sort of like, oh man, I don't want to put that on my debit card. It's right. Like, why don't I just do this?
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think it goes back to something we've talked about several times. I mean, sometimes these larger transactions are just kind of a pain in the neck because, you don't have your card balance, you don't have enough on the card, or
Well, you
whatever.
do, but you don't really want it to go up that high.
Yeah, because it's going to hurt your credit report if your
Right.
balance goes high. So I think for
Yeah.
the average consumer, it's a big deal. Yeah, mine was it's funny actually. Yeah, I'm still paying that. It's a
It was a
there
trip,
was a
wasn't
trip.
it?
Yeah, it was a trip where I paid for some of my family to do this trip, and there was a Southwest Airlines tickets. And because of where they were flying to and from, it was like $5,000 or $6,000, I think. And when I was going to go pay for it with my card, and when I went to pay for it with my card, it said buy now, pay later. And I thought, oh, okay, this is what this is. I got to try this out. So I did it to see how it worked, and the thing I was amazed with was how smooth it was.
Right.
And the irony is it actually was more convenient for me. It was 0% interest.
Right.
And it was actually more convenient for me than using my card, because with my card, the one I was going to use was my debit card.
Right.
And I was going to have to call the bank because my max is like a $4,000 transaction. This was like 5,000 or 6,000. So I was going to have to call my bank, wait on hold, get them to increase the per transaction limit. And I'm like, or I could just buy now, pay later at 0%. And they instantly approved it and it went through. And I was like, oh, that was actually pretty cool.
Yeah, I had a similar thing. I was buying a tool for my yard work.
Okay.
And it was just a little bit more than I wanted to put on a debit card. And so the only thing that surprised me is I kept forgetting that was out there. And so, I'd look at my bank account, like, where's that transaction? Because it was every 2 weeks, And I think that's one of the things that the regulators are concerned about, that there's a lot of people that are taking these out that are not, say, as financially savvy as you and I are. And the
overdrafting their account, that sort of thing.
Right. They overdraw their account. I mean, there's been I think it was a Consumer Reports study that found, where do I have this here? I thought I had it here, but it was something like, 18% of people had missed at least one payment.
Right. I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that a lot of those people had 4 or more loans out. So that's where I think it really, the thing that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has talked about, and what the UK seems to do is, been saying is, you need to do some checks to make sure these people really aren't carrying 4 or 6 or 8 of these loans and eating up, half of their monthly income paying off the loans. And I think it's only right, obviously, given that those are the same rules that apply in the credit card world.
Exactly. Sure. Yep. I agree. I think one last thing I want to add to that real quick, Patty, is,
sure.
I think for our audience listening, if you still don't have a BNPL offer for your merchants, and you deal with, merchants that have a larger average ticket size, even, auto repair is like becoming really popular with BNPL. So when you think about that, make sure you have a BNPL option. We've interviewed several people on the podcast about it, but make sure you have a BNPL option.
Yeah, important.